Very good morning, friends. I welcome you all to a very important lecture on the topic of Directive Principles of State Policy. We all know that DPSP is one of the most important topic as far as your exams is concerned, and you can rest be assured that almost every year at least one question is asked from this topic. That is the importance of this topic, friends. Also, it is also one of the most scoring areas as far as your exams is concerned, and we all know that there are other topics also from where questions are asked, but over there the probability of tricking the questions is pretty high, but over here the questions are pretty much straightforward, and the possibility of the asking question that are of a difficulty level is also very little or very rare. Okay, friends, so first of all, we must understand the origin of DPSP. From where did this principle of directive principles of state policy originate? Because we all know that the Indian Constitution has borrowed principles from various other countries' constitution, like the socialist principles from the Soviets, the fundamental duties from the Soviets. The in Indian Constitution is more of a unitary bias that's based on the Canadian Constitution. The amendment of the procedure for amendment that has also been borrowed from some other constitution. So this DPSP, we all know that it has been borrowed from the Irish Constitution. It's one of the most important aspects, and definitely a question can be asked in this regard. Moving on, the directive principles of state policy is which part of the Constitution? Part 4 of the Constitution. Friends, please remember that Part 3 is fundamental duties, Part 4 is DPSP, Part 4A is fundamental duties. Please remember it's not Part 5, because DPS fundamental duties was brought in with a constitutional amendment, and in the constitution anything that is suffixed with an A, capital A, denotes amendment. For example, Part 4A of the Constitution is for fundamental duties. Similarly, then the article which is which deals with or which covers the fundamental duties, Article 51A. Okay, that we will look into as we move on with the fundamental duties. But to begin with, DPSP, the directive principles of state policy, was enumerated in Part 4 of the Constitution, and the articles which deal with it are 36 and 51. 36 to 51. The framers of the Constitution borrowed this idea from the Irish Constitution, as I told you. Okay, the origin or the basis is Irish Constitution, which had copied it from the Spanish Constitution, maybe, but still, what is more important, or the origin is Irish Constitution only. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar described these principles as novel features. Why are these called as novel features? See, because the nature of the exam has become more complex, more competition has come up. Definitely, questions can be asked even more in an even more innovative fashion. Therefore, why is it called as the novel feature? Because what is DPSP? See, fundamental right is something that is guaranteed to you. Fundamental duty is something that is expected of you. But then, what is this directive principles of state policy? Directive principles of state policy are a direction to the government to ensure that these principles are followed when they frame the laws. But then you may ask, why didn't they declare it as a fundamental right? The answer is very simple, because for certain DPSPs, to implement DPSPs, you need immense resources. It was something that was absent with the government when the constitution was framed. This is the importance of directive principles of state policy. I hope I have made it very clear. Directive principles is of almost of equal importance of fundamental rights, but not as fundamental as fundamental rights. But these are also important. But then it's not very easy to implement these laws. For example, right to education, that what we have today, right to education. It was a it was a DPSP earlier. Eventually, it was brought into the fundamental right. This is how it is, because at that point of time when the constitution was written, it was not at all possible to give education as a fundamental right. But today we have the resources, therefore we launched Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and eventually that was transformed into Right to Education Act, and then eventually we got it in the as a fundamental right. The directive principles along with the fundamental rights contain the philosophy of the constitution and is the soul of the constitution. Granville Austin has described the DPSP and the fundamental rights as the conscience of the constitution. Friends, please remember, definitely a question can be asked as to Granville Austin calls which of the following as the conscience of the constitution. Option A, fundamental right. Option B, DPSP. Option C, none of the above. Option 3, Both 1 and 2. The correct answer is both 1 and 2. Moving on. What are the features of directive principles? The phrase directive principles of state policy denotes the ideals that the state should keep in mind while formulating policies and enacting laws, as I told you, friends. These are something that the state must keep in mind when they formulate policies or they enact laws. Okay, it is important. These are the constitutional instructions or recommendations to the state in legislative, executive, as well as administrative matters. That is, whenever the government is framing any constitution. For example, if a government wants to pass some land acquisition law, one of the fundamental duties is to protect our environment. So when we talk about the protection of environment, definitely that act has to come in. Similarly, there certain acts can be brought in, because, see, for example, banning of smoking in public places, it has to a certain extent basis in the fundamental duty that talks about protecting public health. Okay, friends. Okay. According to Article 36, the term in a state in Part 4 has the same meaning as in Part 3 dealing with fundamental rights. What is the meaning of state? State means government of India, the territories that come in the government. See, friends, it's capital S. I hope you all know the difference between the term state when a small s is used and a capital S is used. When a capital S is used, it denotes the central government or the government of India. Okay, it includes the legislative and executive organs of the central and the state government, all local authorities and other public authorities in the countries. Public authorities means also public sector undertakings, friends. The directive principles resemble the instrument of instructions. Yes, it has a great resemblance to the instrument of instructions that was in the Government of India Act of 1935. Friends, while teaching one of the history classes also, we have talked about the importance of the Government of India Act of 1935, which talks about the instrument of instructions, which is the basis from which the directive principles have been taken. You may ask, then what is the Irish Constitution? Definitely Irish Constitution is from where we have taken the ideas, but then even the earliest basis for this DPSP was in the instrument of instructions during the Government of India Act of 1935. In the words of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the directive principles are like the instrument of instruction which are issued to the Governor General and the governors of the colonies of India by the British government and the Government of India Act of 1935. Okay, friends, moving on. What is called directive principles is merely another name for the instrument of instructions. The only difference is that the instrument of the instructions to the legislative and the executive, now it's even for the legislative, the executive as well as the administrative bodies. The directive principles constitute a very comprehensive economic, social and political program for a modern democratic state. The aim of realizing the high ideals of justice, liberty, equality and fraternity as outlined in the preamble. Okay, to ensure that our nation moves from a police state to a welfare state, wherein more importance is given to the rights of the people, where not only ensuring that the law and order is ensured, but also ensure that our nation moves towards a welfare state and not a police state where only government, security, the law and order machinery, that is what is mentioned. No, it's a welfare. The concept of welfare states. Its welfare state is also of great importance, the term welfare state, because definitely in your mains also there can be a possibility of a question being asked about the difference between a welfare state, a laissez-faire state, a police state. I hope you all know what is a laissez-faire state and what a welfare state is. Laissez-faire state is wherein the government does not interfere at all. That's one of the brilliant examples of laissez-faire state is a kind of a capitalist economy. But when we take the case of a welfare state, the idea is more of a socialist in idea. When we talk about police state, communist kind of a government is more of socialistic in nature. See, but then we cannot directly brand them as socialist or a police state. But there are limitations, but still to give you a broader picture, make you people understand, that's what. Okay, so in brief, they seek to establish an economic and social democracy in the country. The directive principles are non-justiciable in nature. Friends, please remember, like fundamental rights, they are justiciable in nature. That is, if a fundamental right is violated, you can approach the court and ask for the fundamental rights to be ensured, but that's not the case with with DPSP. That is, they are not legally enforceable by the courts for their violation. Therefore, the government, that is the central government, the state government or the local government, cannot be compelled to implement them. Nevertheless, the Constitution under Article 37 itself says that these principles are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. Okay. The directive principles, though non-justifiable in nature, help the courts in examining and determining the constitutional validity of a law. Definitely, friends. Courts at times can take the DPSP into consideration while ensuring the constitutional validity of a law. The Supreme Court has ruled many a times that in determining the constitutionality of any law, it may consider such a law to be reasonable in relation to Article 14, that is equality before law, or Article 19, that is the six freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom to carry on profession, freedom to move around, okay, freedom of religion, and thus save such a law from being unconstitutional. Now, the directive principles are classified. Friends, see, directive principles, they start from Article 39, almost 38, they move on up to 51. But they can be classified. Why? See, I can take in the exact order as it has been given. But in exam, definitely questions are asked based on these lines. Which are the following directive principles are? Because there's not much scope for the question being twisted with regard to DPSP. Therefore, usually the examiner asks questions like which of the following directive principles are socialistic in nature, which of the following are Gandhian in nature. So such questions definitely are asked in the exam. Okay, therefore please remember, friends, question will be asked in these lines only. Okay, so the constitution, so the first is socialistic principles. What are the socialistic principles? See, socialistic principles are more related to the socialistic ideas that the government wishes to put forth. Okay, as we look into the DPSP, you will understand what socialistic principles are. These principles reflect the ideology of socialism. They lay down the framework of a democratic socialist state, aim at providing social and economic justice, and set the path towards a welfare state. They direct the state. What do they direct this? To promote the welfare of the people by securing a social order permeated by justice, social, economic and political, and to minimize inequalities in income, status, facilities, opportunities. This is the first article of DPSP, that is article number 38. Moving on. Next is to secure the right to adequate means of livelihood to all the citizens, to ensure that there is equitable distribution of material resources in the community for common good. Friends, please, I hope you people remember history. There was a period when Indira Gandhi, our late Prime Minister, nationalized a lot of banks. What was the purpose for nationalization of banks? Many of the banks were nationalized and they were made into public sector banks. What was the primary reason? It took the basis from this act only, that is, so as to prevent the concentration of wealth within a few hands. Okay, that is prevention of concentration of wealth and means of production, and to ensure equal pay for equal work for both men and women, preservation of health and strength of workers and children against forcible abuse, and opportunities for healthy development of children. Friends, I hope I have made you clear what socialistic principles are. Next, to promote equal justice and provide free legal aid to the poor. Yes, see, free legal aid to the poor, that is a part of socialistic principles only, and it is article 39A. Okay, moving on. To secure right to work, education and public assistance in case of unemployment, old age, sickness and disablement. Yes, moving on. To make provision for just and humane working conditions and maternity relief. See, friends, nowadays Maternity Benefit Act is in play. Women have been given more days as maternity leave. So these are examples of this socialistic principle only. Okay, moving on. to secure a living wage, a decent standard of living, and social and cultural opportunities for all workers. Article number 43. Friends, please remember what are the MGNREGA. MGNREGA is a prime example of this act, this Article 43 only. Moving on. To take steps to secure the participation of workers in the management of industries. Yes, nowadays we all know that the presence of union, how labor union and all works. It works on the principle of this act only, Article 43 only, 43A. To raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living of people, to improve the public health, that is Article 47. Please remember, friends, the article numbers 38, 39, 41, 42, 43, 43A and 47. Okay.